Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit, Neye EGUA Medinde Ujirafo, Kwesi Ranehm Pata Akan. Akwamumai Namaruka Etipi Mu Ojirafo, Ojiramai Mu. Greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning African Black people. Today is EGUA Day, Marketplace Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Ranehm Pata Akan. Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojiramai, the purified nation, Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. We are opening up the chat room right now. If you have any questions or comments and you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. We have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akan Fo Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joda Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of ancestral religion. First and foremost, because we are Akan. Secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan cosmology, ancestral religion, ritual practice, the nature of the Abosom, the deities, the nature of the Nanonom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors, the nature of the Supreme Being, Nyamewa and Nyame, the Great Mother and Great Father, the nature of the Creator and Creatress in Yonkompon and in Yonkonton, Ra and Raed, and so forth. So we go into detail about ancestral religion from the Akan perspective. We deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion, talking about our ancestral origins in ancient Kanat, the Kan land, ancient Nubia, our ancestral origins. Some of our people migrated from ancient Nubia, from ancient Kanat. 2,000 years ago, after the fall of Kemet, we migrated to the western part of the continent, reestablished ourselves in the empire of Kanat, Wagana. After Muslim invasions, about 1,000 years later, some of our people migrated further south into the region of today's contemporary Ivory Coast and Ghana, reestablished Akan civilization. Hundreds of years later, some of us were taken from those regions into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. However, we maintained our ancestral religious practices. Thus, the Akan ancestral religion is called Winti in Suriname and South America, from the Akan term Quinti. In Jamaica, it is called Obia, the Akan tradition, from the Akan term Obai. In America, the United States, the Akan ancestral religion is called Hoodoo, from the Akan term Undu, meaning medicine from trees, roots, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit. We also call the tradition Conjure, which comes from the Akan term Kanche, which means to utter incantations to bring forward the spirits of the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo, the deities and ancestral spirits. These terms, Undu or Hoodoo and Kanche, also exist in the language of ancient Kanit and Kanat, with the exact same meanings. Undu meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy. Kanche also means to utter incantations. Ka, to bring forward the spirits of the deities. Che, and so forth. So we have these ancient terms that we've used for thousands of years to identify our ritual practices from ancient Kanit and Kemet through West Afurakai into the Western Hemisphere. So this is what we deal with on Monday nights, on the Ojira broadcast. On Abenada Tuesday nights, we deal with purification. Ojira means purification, so we purify concepts, purify culture, the understanding of cosmology, ritual practice, and so forth, not just for the Akan ancestral religion, but for ancestral religion in general. Wherever Afuraitkaitnit people, African Black people exist in the world, we are animated and guided in our thoughts, intentions, and actions by our ancestral religious practices. So we deal with how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives on the Ojira broadcast. Ancestral religion in essence, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. We state that Ojira, purification, operationalizes Nanason. Purification operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance. This is how we maintain our culture or way of life. Our way of life as Afuraitkaitnit people is to execute our divine function in creation. As cells within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, we have a specific function to execute within the divine body. We seek to align every thought, every intention, and every action with divine order every moment of every day. That is our culture. Our culture is the divine acceptance, the law or love of order, and the divine rejection, the hate of disorder and its purveyors. We accept that which is harmonious, that supports our divine function in creation, and we reject, hate, repel, repulse that which is disordered, disharmonious, that would otherwise place us out of harmony with divine order. This is how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives, because as we seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day, when we make legitimate mistakes, then we engage the ritual process to ritually incorporate divine law and ritually restore divine balance so that we can realign every thought, intention, and action with divine order. So ancestral religion impacts and animates every aspect of our lives. So on the Ojira broadcast on Tuesday nights, we talk about the purification of understanding, purification of concepts, culture, ritual practice, and so forth, so we can understand how to fully embrace our ancestral culture, our way of life, which is animated by our ancestral religious practices. On Yauda Thursday nights, we have Mindset Affairs of the Nation. Thursday is also Yada Abada Thursday nights. We deal with our approach as an Oman, a nation specifically, Ojira Mind, the purified nation, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere, our approach to specific issues that confront us as an Oman, as a nation. We recognize that an Oman is a living, breathing entity similar to an organ that is governed by specific abosomes, specific forces in nature. The cells that are children of that organal structure function interdependently with regard to one another, but they also function to support the larger function of the organ of which they are a component part. We are cells within the great divine body. We are children of specific organs. As Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere, we have been forced initially to the Western Hemisphere during the Musuo Kessier, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. However, we were drawn by our ancestresses and ancestors to coalesce in a specific region of the Earth Mother's body, blend ancestral blood circles in this region, interface with the Earth Mother divinities in this region, take in that unique expression of energy from this region through plant life, animal life, mineral life, from food as well as medicine and ritual practice, interface with the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, as they manifest in a unique fashion in this region of the Earth Mother's body, incorporate and absorb that unique dispensation of energy coming from the Abosom, the forces of nature in this region, as well as through that coalescing of ancestral blood circles, and therefore we bring children into the world that carry that unique confluence of energy from this region. We have forged a locative identity because of that process, because of that confluence of events, and therefore we have a unique expression of ancestral religion, culture, and so forth, and also a unique approach to solving our problems. We deal with an Amaniye or nationist approach. Amaniye, which is the term we use for nationism, is the purification of nationalism. It is an understanding of nation building a proper understanding which is rooted in our ancestral religious values, recognizing an Oman nation is a living, breathing entity governed by forces in creation, of which we are a component part. So that's what we deal with on that show on Yauda Thursday nights. Tonight is Awukuda Akwada Wednesday. We have EGUA Marketplace Day. We do two things. We showcase Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions that are serving the Afuraitkaitnit community in a positive capacity, those who maintain their ancestral religious values in the context of their service to the community. We also showcase the philosophical foundation for economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. We have published our OCOM economic development model, which you can download for free from our website, which is an approach to economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. It is thus a holistic approach to economic development. Part of that process is the Starve the Beast and Feed the Pride operation, where we highlight an Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution every week. We make an assessment regarding what funds we would have potentially wasted with the whites and their offspring in the course of a week, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We reallocate those funds we would have potentially wasted at a white business and direct them to the business, organization, or institution of the week. If you reallocate $10 away from a white business and direct it to a black business in the course of a week, that's an infusion of $10 to that black business. When 1,000 people engage that process, that is an infusion of $10,000 away from different white businesses to one black business. That black business has a capacity now in the course of 7 days with an infusion of $10,000 to immediately hire from within the community full-time employees instantly and permanently. It allows us and that business to expand their products and services to us so we can come to them for those services and never have to go to the white business again. We're serving our community on multiple levels. If we don't engage that process, then by default, we leave the funds in the hands of our enemies, the whites and their offspring. By default, we are financing our own oppression. As we've talked about in the past on the EGUA Marketplace show, we spend over $1 trillion, now it's getting to $1.1 trillion on a yearly basis in the Afuraitkaitnit community. Over 95+% of that $1 trillion, $950 billion plus is spent with white businesses, and the other 5% and less, $50 billion and so forth, is spent with our businesses. A week with the whites and their offspring. If we take 10% of that, one person at $50,000 a year, if we simply take 10+% of that $20 billion that we're wasting with the whites and offspring on a weekly basis and transfer at least 10% of it to our black business. Meaning if you think about the funds you spend on a weekly basis at white businesses and say I'm going to take 10% of what I normally spend in the course of a week at white businesses and redirect that to a black business, whatever black business it is, then that means if you spend $200 a week at white businesses and you take $20 that you would have spent and direct it to a black business, that's a $20 infusion of capital. But when millions of our people engage that process, that's billions of dollars being taken from white businesses, white bank accounts, directly into black bank accounts. That's billions of dollars, and that's the capacity to hire every single black person who is unemployed in the country permanently at $50,000 a year, even if we just use that particular calculation. Of course, we can do more than that. So we have the capacity to fund every project that we need, whether it's healing centers, hospitals, schools, and so forth. We have the funds to do so. We need to stop giving our funds to our enemies, those who despise us, and direct them to these 2 million black businesses who exist, who very often are struggling because our people are giving billions of dollars to purchase tobacco, alcohol, billions of dollars on white movies and other nonsense, which we could direct directly to black businesses that are actually serving our community. So this is what we deal with on the EGUA broadcast. Tonight we're going to focus on the female Ntorot, or female abosom divinity, goddess of the inundation and of ritual song, Merit. There are two Merit divinities, twin divinities, Merit, Shema, and Merit, Met. Merit of the south and Merit of the north in ancient Kemet. And we've talked about these just in a previous broadcast. We talked about HAPI and Merit, HAPI of the south and HAPI of the north, the male divinity of the inundation of the river. And we talked about Merit, Shema, and Merit, Met, Merit of the south and Merit of the north, and how they work together. HAPI and Merit are married, husband and wife and so forth, the northern and southern female and male divinities of the Nile River and so forth. So we went into some detail about that. These are the patron and matron deities, abosom, Orisha Vodou, of our upcoming HAPI-MERIT Hiber-Nation retreat, training, cultural, and ritual retreat that we're having in February in South Carolina on Edisto Island, one of the Gullah Islands. And you can look on our website for details about that. If you would like to register, you can still do so. The late registration is still in effect for a couple of spaces that we have left. Because of cancellations, we had a couple of spaces that opened up, which we mentioned. So you can go to the page. The link is on the website. So we talked about them working in concert with one another. We talked about them, just like HAPI and Merit, animate the inundation of the river in ancient Kemet, the energy that animates that overflowing of the river and so forth, the male and female expansive and contractive forces, the spirits that animate that river and the inundation of the river. We talked about that with regard to the river of blood within the body, or the rivers of blood within the body. We talked about how HAPI is governing the arteries and Merit is governing the veins and so forth, and they work together in that context. So we dealt with that in a previous broadcast. We're going to focus on another function of Merit tonight, Merit Shema and Merit Met, with regard to the inundation and also ritual song. So, and show that connection to her being the one dealing with ritual song and offerings and merriment and so forth. Merit is a divinity, and when we talk about Merit in this context, Meriti means the dual or the two Merit divinities, Merit Shema, Merit Met. So sometimes we'll say Merit in singular, but we're talking about both divinities. She's often not focused on at all, so people don't know who she is and assume that she's some minor divinity, simply because the whites and their offspring don't spend too much time talking about this divinity. And because our people, when they study culture, they typically very often follow the lead of the whites and their offspring, because that's the mindset that many of our people have. So whatever the whites and their offspring do not focus on, we don't focus on. And we simply typically just blacken up what they focus on. We recognize that these deities and the people of ancient Kemet and Kanat were black people, so we focus on that aspect of it, but we don't deal with the culture itself. We've inferiorized our own ancestral religious practices after the order of the whites and their offspring, or the disorder of the whites and their offspring, so therefore we don't understand the direct connection of our ancestrally inherited ritual practices, ancestral religion, which is the survival and the expression of our ancient ancestral religious practices. When we talk about what happened to the priests and priestesses and ritual practices of ancient Kanit and Kemet, they didn't disappear. Some people remained in ancient Kemet, mainly in the south, after white invasions and so forth. And you have whites who invaded. They're controlling the white Arabs and so forth, controlling the north and the central portions. Many black people live in southern Kemet today. They're living under the economic control of the whites and their offspring. Many migrated further south into Kanit or Nubia and continued, the ritual practices and the culture and civilization and pyramid building and everything else. Some of our people migrated away from those areas. Some of our people remained. Those who remained, they still exist there today. They live in southern Kemet and they live in Sudan, and they never left. Some of our people migrated west. Some remained in North Afuraitkaitnit, and they still exist there today. Some continue to migrate west and establish themselves in the western part of the continent, as we talked about the Empire of Ghana, as well as the Empire of Mali and Songhai and so forth, and other empires in Burkina Faso, mostly people and so forth. Yoruba people, Ewe, Igbo, Bakongo, Ovambo, various people. We migrated to these different areas in west and central and portions of south Afuraitkaitnit and portions of north as well. Some of our people, as we said, were taken from those regions and forced into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe. The priesthoods and priestesshoods and the ritual practices being possessed by the divinities, of course, we carry that in our blood, so wherever we migrated in the world or were forced to migrate, we carried the same traditions. So the exact same deities who were possessing us when we lived in the East are the exact same forces in nature that possess our people in West Afuraitkaitnit, Central and South, and in North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe. The same sun shines on the same people, the same oceans, rivers, Earth Mother, planets, stars, black substance of space, wind and so forth, fire, these same forces in nature that impact us physically, that have impacted us for millions of years, are the same forces in nature that impact us today wherever we exist in the world. The same spirits that animate the Earth Mother and animate the oceans and animate the rivers and animate the black substance of space and animate the suns and moon and planets and stars and so forth are the same spirits that have been animating these features of creation for millions of years, and they are the same spirits that animate our spirit bodies, just like the physical vessels they operate through, empower and nourish and guide our physical bodies. So the exact same deities who possessed us in the past are possessing us now, including in Hoodoo, the Akan tradition in North America, Juju, the Yoruba tradition in North America, Wanga, the Ovambo tradition in North America, Voodoo, the Fon and Ewe tradition in North America, and so forth. In Gengai, the Fang tradition in North America, so these different traditions, and the priesthoods and priestesshoods, the Juju men, Juju women, Voodoo men, Voodoo women, Hoodoo men, Hoodoo women, Wanga men, Wanga women, and so forth. These are the exact same priesthoods and priestesshoods that have existed for thousands of years. This is the quote-unquote survival or continuation of the ancestral religious practices you found in ancient Kemet, Kanit. They never stopped. How could they? The forces in the nature don't stop. They don't stop animating creation. And we are born into the world. We carry these divinities within our blood circle, so of course we're going to continue to practice the same tradition. When Negroes are following the whites and their offspring, they have a disconnection from ancestral religious practice because the whites and their offspring taught them that that's inferior, whether it's talking about polytheism and trying to make that inferior, which is stupidity. Polytheism is the order of creation, and it's superior because it's reality. Monotheism is pure stupidity. It's born of the inferior mind of the Caucasian. They have no capacity to communicate with, experience all the various deities that animate the various aspects of creation. So they would like for us to cut ourselves off from them so we can follow the whites and offspring. So they manufactured the idea of monotheism, and they are the representative of the one quote-unquote fake God that they put forward. That's pure stupidity. But some of our people fall into that, and they're embarrassed about reality, polytheism, so they suppress that, and they just follow the whites and their offspring. They disconnect themselves from ancestral religion because they think it's inferior. They rather intellectualize the accomplishments of ancient Kemet, try to turn it into a pseudo-esoteric society or into some kind of atheistic, nonsensical society or a pseudo-scientific society with no basis in ancestral religion, and they cut themselves off. And therefore, they'll read about some of these deities, read about them, learn how to read and write the language and learn the names and so forth and how to write them. But they have no connection to these forces in nature because they don't engage in authentic ritual practice. They don't invoke Merit, Shema, or Merit Met. They don't know anything about them, and they can't identify them in different traditions because they don't work with them. They can't contextualize any experience that they have spiritually because they don't deal with them. Yet they will promote themselves as having some measure of expertise, which they do not. So when we talk about these deities, we talk about them because we still invoke them ritually on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And they manifest and communicate with us through ritual practice inclusive of divination, spirit communication, spirit possession, so we can talk about them and we can look at ancient texts and see the same practices that we engage in today. And when we see what's written about them, of course, it's still the same function that they manifest today. So we have a direct, intimate relationship with them. Anybody practicing ancestral religion in an authentic manner has a connection to these divinities. So when we talk about them, we can contextualize that experience. And when we talk about ancestral religion, once again, we're talking about that which we inherit through our ancestral blood circles. We don't receive deities or ancestral religion by running to someone and getting something from the continent of the Caribbean and so forth. If we're here in North America, we are assigned abosom forces in nature, including Merit and Merit Shema Merit Met, by the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, before we even enter into the womb. So we come into the world assigned to specific abosom ratio Vodou and so forth, and we carry that through our ancestral blood circle. That energy is transmitted to us by our direct ancestresses and ancestors. So nobody outside of our direct ancestral blood circle can give us our ancestral religion. This is how we were able to maintain ancestral religion for hundreds of years in the Western Hemisphere. So, authentically. So when we talk about Merit, this is the context within which we talk about her or them, both Merit divinities, and any other force in nature in creation, because we still consistently invoke them. So if you look at information about her, the inundation of the river, Merit, that term Merit means the swelling of the river and so forth. The river swells and overruns its banks and so forth, and once the waters recede, then the black silt has been deposited on the banks of the river in ancient Kemet, and people go out and plant and so forth and have abundance and so forth. That's part of that process. We talked about that. So the rivers swell, the waters recede, people plant, eventually crops are, manifest in abundance, and then people harvest those crops. And once those, the fruits of their labor, they harvest the fruits and so forth, that is the end of the cycle, the harvesting, but at the same time, it's the beginning of the next cycle, which is the seeding process. This is why the new year in the Akan tradition in North America, the autumn equinox, it's the end of the warm cycle. It is the harvest period. You harvest the fruits and so forth, but then it's also the beginning of the seeding cycle, or the conception cycle. So you consume what you have, what you have grown, you've harvested, but then it's also time to plant the seed so you can have another abundant crop later on. So, but harvesting is important, and this is directly related to Merit. When we talk about the blood flowing through the arteries, dealing with HAPI, and the blood is flowing through the arteries coming from the left side of the heart, the left ventricle and so forth, the blood is leaving, bringing nutrients and oxygenated blood, that energy to all the different cells in the body, moving through the arteries and so forth. That's that transmission of energy and nutrients, and the blood is, empowering the different organs and cells and so forth. And then the veins capture the deoxygenated blood and carry that deoxygenated blood back up to the heart in the other half of the cycle, to the right, atrium and ventricle of the heart and so forth, so that it can be oxygenated by the lungs once again, empowered, and then the cycle can continue. So once on the HAPI side, HAPI-MERIT, HAPI-MET, Northern HAPI, HAPI-RESET, Southern HAPI, when the blood is moving through the arteries and nourishing the various cells, Merit comes along and harvests what has been given to the cells and the organs and so forth. One is feeding the cells, one is harvesting. Once the cells, just like plant life and so forth, once they're fed and they're growing and developing and fully flowering and so forth, then you reach that point where the full flowering has taken place and the fruits and so forth are fully mature. That's when HAPI is flooded the different cells and organs. They receive the nutrients, they grow and develop, and then they fully mature. Then you go and capture what has been fully developed. You capture the fruits and so forth. If you went to an apple tree and you see the apples are fully matured and so forth, you can either take them or pluck them from the tree or allow them to fall off of the tree. Now they're fully formed and you can harvest. You have your basket and you can harvest. And once you harvest, you can feed off of that and you can nourish yourself. But two things are going on at that point. There's a harvesting taking place, and you see Metis, the great divinity, and she has, in one context, she has her basket and she's harvesting and she's singing and so forth, and she's a songstress and making merriment and becoming merry or happy and so forth, because when the harvest time comes, that's the happy time, that's the merry time, it's time for merriment and so forth. She's capturing all of the, the offerings, the harvest in the basket and so forth. She's capturing what is being released by the different organs and cells and so forth. And once she captures what they have, and then she carries that back up to the heart and so forth, there's oxygen moving through the blood, and it's nourishing and empowering and so forth. But then she captures that deoxygenated blood, which includes carbon dioxide, and carries that through back up to the heart. Carbon dioxide is essential in reality for internal respiration. So carbon dioxide is not, quote-unquote, negative. You can't survive without carbon dioxide. That's very key. If you look at basic information about internal respiration, for example, you look on a website, when speaking of breathing, the first thing most people think about is oxygen, but carbon dioxide is actually just as important, which not many people know about. Every cell in our body needs a certain concentration of dioxide emissions, around 6.5%, in order to maintain a normal life. When human life first began on the planet, the atmosphere had a different composition than today. There were over 20% carbon dioxide in the air. Carbon dioxide concentration has fallen sharply and so forth. But during normal, healthy breathing, these alveoli contain about around 6.5% carbon dioxide. When we inhale and exhale normally, there are 6.5% carbon dioxide in the lungs in balance with the oxygen that we need to live. If that balance is disrupted, then people suffer from that lack of carbon dioxide. So the oxygenated blood is key, but nutrients and so forth, and that's being sent through the arteries and flooding the different cells, the flood of the river, the inundation of the river, the flooding of the land in ancient Kemet, the flooding of the organs and tissues and cells and so forth, with that oxygenated blood bringing nutrients so they can grow and develop and function and so forth. But then the capturing of what the cells that have been fully oxygenated begin to release, that's captured in the vessels, captured in the veins, and carried back up to the heart. Merit is capturing what is released by the cells. She captures that. She harvests that. We feed from that harvest. But then at the same time, if you look at our side of it, we're glad when the harvest happens because we take the apples, we take the fruits and so forth, and we feed from them. But you look at it from the tree perspective or the fruits perspective, as soon as the apple detaches from the tree, it's detached from its life source. That's a quote-unquote death. That's where the term merit also means death in ancient Kemet. As soon as that apple is detached, the life force energy that's surging through the tree and moving through the branches to the apple is a detachment. But that energy is still within the apple for a period. It begins to, oxidize, but it's in there for a period. We have a chance to take the energy from that and feed off of it and empower ourselves. If you leave the apples on the ground and so forth, after a while they begin to rot. But prior to that, if you get them when they're fresh, you can still feed off of the energy that's still circulating within that, within that fruit. So you capture the harvest. It's a time for quote unquote merriment or merit, time for, joy and feasting and so forth. So you feed off of that, and then you utilize that which you feed off of to empower yourself. Merit uses her vessel, her basket, her gourd and so forth to capture what was empowered by HAPI through the cells and so forth. She captures that, carries it through the veins and goes right through the body once again, up back to the heart, and the whole process starts all over again. The key here is Merit. When she transliteration Merit or Meret, they talk about her as a goddess of rejoicing in song, especially the vocal apparatus. It says, you shall not take your stand in his throat. Merit is against you, the lady of the throat. That's in the Chester Beatty Papyrus. Music was very important to the cult of the divinities. Also in daily life, Merit is talking about music and songstress and so forth, and Merit being a title of a certain aspect of the throat. What we're talking about here is the larynx and the vocal folds or the vocal cords, which is directly related to, there's a blood supply that's connected to that area and so forth. But when the energy is moving through the bloodstream, pulsing through the bloodstream, the drummer in the body is the heart. You can feel that drumming in the pulse. But as the energy, and you see Merit, the two Merit divinities sometimes taking the form of women, but sometimes taking the form of two cobras, that cobra undulating energy that's moving within the bloodstream and the water within the bloodstream, that is those sound vibrations that are generated by that cobra energy vibrating through the bloodstream. That is the song of Merit, when she captures the energy that's been flooded through the organs and systems and cells and so forth by HAPI. She carries that energy and then carries it through the veins. Her movement, her undulating movement in the form of those two serpent divinities. If you listen with a spiritual ear, that is the song of Merit, and she's carrying that song or those vibrations through all of the cells of the body, through the veins, all the way back up to the heart. So the song of Merit, Merit Shema, Merit Met, is that movement of that serpent energy through the bloodstream, and it's constantly moving through the circulatory system throughout the course of our lives. Now, if you look at, for example, okay, so you look at her symbolism. I'm pulling this information up, so give me 1 second. There's a particular piece I wanted to read out. I had the information. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so you're looking at the Pert Imheru, also in the coffin texts. There's a couple of quote-unquote spells in the coffin text, as well as in the Pert Imheru, chapter 37. There's a corresponding, they're talking about the coffin text, and then there's also the corresponding spells or chapters in the Runu Pert Imheru. In the coffin text, utterance 440, there's a section that says, I am Ra, I am the master of the two Merit divinities, you noble companions of Ra who make Ra healthy. You possess what you have requested, you possess your joy. So the two companions of Ra, the Meriti divinities, Ra, of course, as well as Ra, the divine living energy that's circulating within creation. Once you breathe in the divine living energy or the air, the energy is within the air, and that's what goes into the lungs, and that's what oxygenates the blood ultimately. So therefore, once it gets into the blood and is circulating within the blood, that Ra and Ra'et energy is circulating within the blood as the Ba and the Ba'et. Merit Shema and Merit Met, the two Meriti divinities, are the companions of Ra and Ra'et when they're moving through, the blood and so forth, and moving through the body. And they talk about the mistresses of joy and song and so forth, as that energy is coursing through the veins. It's one thing to course through your nervous system, for example, and those are the electric impulses in the nervous system, coursing through the lungs and so forth. But when it gets into the bloodstream, then those serpents and that serpent energy, that wave energy is moving through the bloodstream. Then it's captured by Merit, Shema, Merit, Met, and that serpent energy, those waves of energy manifest sound waves, and that's the song or the chanting of Merit Shema and Merit Met. That energy is circulating through the blood. As long as it's circulating over and over and over again, as long as we're living, then those sound vibrations or those movements, and all movements or waves generate sound. faster movements are higher pitched sounds, and slower movements are lower pitched sounds, and so forth. So any movement that happens is generating sound waves, so that's captured by the Merit divinities, and they carry those sound waves throughout the entire body. So there's a difference between speech, which includes when you engage in ritual speech, that's prayer, ritual prayer. On the other spectrum, you have ritual song, which is speech that's elongated, and therefore once speech is elongated, it becomes song and it's connected to melody and so forth. So that carries a different kind of energy than ritual prayer, and they have their own, utility, ritual prayer as well as ritual song. But then in between that, you have a shorter form of ritual song, but it's not as short as ritual prayer. That which sits between ritual prayer, which is speech invocation, and ritual song, which is totally elongated speech, is chanting. So you hear about the divine chantresses in ancient Kemet, the priestesses who are divine chantresses. That's that domain of Merit Shema and Merit Met, that divine chanting. It's a form of song. It's not as elongated as ritual song, long melodies and so forth, but it is melodic, but it's more melodic than ritual prayer. It's right in between prayer and song, and it has its own utility. So when you look at Merit Shema, Merit Met, and they're called the divine chantresses and so forth, and their priestesses are called the divine chantresses, when you have these sound vibrations, it's no different than collecting the harvest and carrying the energy to the different organs in the body. When you collect those sound vibrations that are emanating from plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, the forces in creation, they all, based on their movements in creation, they're generating unique configurations of sound vibrations that is collected or captured by the Merit divinities in their quote-unquote basket, their sacred basket and so forth. And then those sound vibrations are carried through the bloodstream to the different organs and systems within the body and cells to nourish them. That's how the energy is carried and so forth by her. So that happens in the body, that happens in creation and so forth. So when she's dealing with her, and you see both Merit Shema, Merit Met, you see them in a blue dress and a red dress. And of course that's dealing with the red blood, quote unquote, and the blue blood. You look at the, oxygenated blood, which is red, and the vitiated blood, or the deoxygenated blood, which is blue. You see them in their two garments. That's a connection there. But as they're moving, as they're circulating, as they're carrying the energy from HAPI and moving it in merriment, in song, and chanting through the different cells of the body and back up to the heart, they're singing, they're carrying their vessels, they're moving, they're undulating. There's ritual dance as well. They're carrying all of that throughout all of the cells. Now, Het Heru governs music in and of itself. She's the one who pulls together different sounds and fuses them together in a harmonious fusion. So the different sounds, when they're harmoniously fused together, once you hear that, then you hear harmony. If sounds are fused together disharmoniously, then you have discordant sounds, and the music sounds horrible, and those discordant sounds create discordance even in your physical body. When you hear discordant sounds, it creates a dissonance within your body. But when Het Heru pulls together sounds in a harmonious fashion, she manifests, music, and she governs music and so forth, then that harmonious fusion of sounds is the music. Now, once that music is manifest, then Merit Shema and Merit Met take those musical forms and activate them through song, specifically through chant. They take what Het Heru has pulled together, that harmonious fusion of sounds, and they utilize that through chant to release that energy that Het Heru has put together. They utilize it through chant, or, the release of sound vibrations for healing purposes, for merriment, quote unquote, or healing purposes, carrying those songs or those harmonious vibrations to every cell in the body for healing purposes, capturing the harvest, capturing the harmony of the harvest, and then carrying that in the basket to every cell in the body until you get back to the heart, and then it's reoxygenated and refueled and energized and sent back out to the left side of the heart to go through that cycle once again. So this is what Merit is dealing with. This is the chantress, the two chantresses. Every time we engage in ritual chanting, or you hear ritual chanting, you can make a distinction. There's an effect that ritual prayer has on your organs and systems. There's an effect that everybody knows about with ritual song when people are singing, even if people are singing in a secular fashion. Those sound vibrations, if somebody is, attuned and they have a powerful voice and so forth, those sound vibrations move through people and they are motivational. So you can feel the effect of song in that sense. You can feel the effect of music in general, sounds in general, but the ritual song and so forth. But then in between those two is ritual chanting, and that ritual chanting can also lead to motivating the person's spirit to align with their kra, align with the forces in nature, align with the ancestresses and ancestors, and propel that individual, male or female, into that ritual space where spirit possession can take place. So ritual chanting has that effect. It has that capacity to move us into ritual spirit possession and spirit communication. Ritual chanting has a provocatory effect, provoking the energy of the aboso, but it also has that provocatory effect is also invocatory, because once you project and provoke the ritual chanting, release those sound vibrations to provoke the energy of the aboso, sometimes the response is not only a response from them through communication, through imagery, or a dispensation of their energy, but sometimes the response is them coming forward to possess the person. So that chanting leads to that kind of healing process. All of this is combined within the functioning of Merit, the Merit divinities. This is something that we have been engaged in, of course, when you deal with hoodoo, juju, voodoo, wanga, all the different practices here in North America, as well as in the Western Hemisphere and on the continent. Merit, Shema, Merit, Met, they manifest in all of our traditions. Anytime we began naturally and instinctively moving from speaking to a form of ritual prayer and then into chanting and then possession and so forth, we were attuning to Merit Shema and Merit Met. We've been doing that all along. And when we properly contextualize what's taking place, and then when we see these female divinities, once chanting begins, whether it's in a ritual context for ritual possession and so forth, or if it takes place during a funerary context, after the wailing begins and the chanting begins, you see Asaase and Nebet wailing and so forth, that ritual wailing to assist, that release of sound vibrations to assist the ancestral spirit, the newly departed spirit, to recalibrate themselves and become acclimated to their new condition as an ancestral spirit, since they're no longer in their physical body. You see the wailing coming from Asaase and Nebet, but then you also see that moving into chanting with Merit Shema and Merit Met. So that wailing, which initially is a quote-unquote lament or a lamentation and so forth, to get that spirit to recognize the separation that is taking place. When the wailing begins, if someone starts crying all of a sudden and wailing, you know something has happened. You know something has gone wrong. Or maybe not wrong, but the new shift has come, transition has come. So you're drawn to that space to see what's taking place and so forth. The wailing happens. People begin to deflate to a certain extent. They realize this is a new condition. They're not going to be able to interact with the person in the same fashion physically anymore. They're going to have to accept the reality that there is a new condition. They're going to be an ancestral spirit now. They're going to spend most of their time in the ancestral realm and periodically come to the physical realm through spirit possession, spirit communication to communicate with us. And now there's a different relationship. We have to get used to that. So the first portion is that lamentation, that release of sound vibrations. Sometimes it has to do with crying and so forth. And you see those lamenting. You see Asaase and Nebet lamenting and so forth, and their hair being moved in a certain way, and the flood of tears and so forth. But then there's a movement from the lamentation to the chanting. And then you see Merit Shema, Merit Met in the funerary practices. Why is the deities of merriment engaged in funerary ritual? because you shift from lamentation to quote-unquote merriment. And even in our brainwashed, super brainwashed state, and we get involved in Christianity and all of this nonsense, and we're believing in a white character who never existed, Jesus, and all this nonsense, but some of the ritual practices instinctively we still hold on to. So we start off lamenting, and people are crying and falling all over the place and so forth in a church at a funeral service, but then someone instinctively moves them towards the merriment aspect. They shift it over, and people start singing and so forth, and they talk about, well, now we're celebrating the life of the person. Now this is a homegoing party or a celebration. We don't need to be sad. We need to rejoice. We need to be happy that they're going, quote unquote, to heaven. This is what the people are saying. But in reality, the shift from lamentation, when the person is separated from the physical body and they're in that aspect of the spirit realm, but then they move them towards reconnecting with the ancestresses and ancestors in that region of the ancestral realm, where they become seated and grounded, and the ancestresses and ancestors, their great-grandparents and, aunts and uncles and so forth, they are happy to see the person who is now going to dwell with them. We're, quote-unquote, sad that the person is leaving us, but they are happy. And then once we recognize that the person is well taken care of and well seated, now we become happy or happy to a certain extent, because we understand that they're being taken care of, and now they're not going to have to worry if they were sick here, they're not going to be sick there, and so forth. So we shift from lamentation to merriment. We shift from the, those songs of lamentation or dirges, or funerary dirges, and so forth, to those songs of merriment, that chanting that helps propel that spirit to that state of merriment, so they can, be grounded in the ancestral realm. So we were actually engaged in the shift from Asaase and Nebuchadnezzar in their funerary aspect to Merit, Shema, Meri, Met in their funerary aspect, even when we're brainwashed in the church context. But of course, in the Hoodoo tradition, Juju tradition, and so forth, we know actually what's going on, because we're communicating with that spirit. The people who are clairvoyant and clairaudient and clairsentient and so forth, they're communicating with the spirit all along throughout the preparations for the funeral, during the funeral, funerary practices, and so forth. They're establishing an ancestral shrine space for the person and giving food offerings and everything else. And those giving of offerings are directly connected to Merit Shema, Merit Met, when they're giving their offerings and carrying that basket of offerings and so forth, and harvesting, because that harvesting, once again, is a nourishing aspect for us, but it's also a death for the apple or the individual who has been detached from the life source, from the tree. So some people are being nourished, but then the apple itself is being, that's death, but then the seed of the apple can be planted, and, another tree can rise up, so that's a resurrection. So that harvesting, but then planting, that's the death, but that's also the renewal. So Merit and Mer and Merit, plural, means death and so forth, but it also has the capacity and the potential for resurrection and renewal. All of that is wrapped up in these divinities. So it's not just, but it's not also just the funerary practices that we're talking about. That's one part of it, and we can see that very clearly. But it also has to do with initiatory practices ritually. It also has to do with us going into the ancestral realm during divination and so forth. If there's some issue that's going on that's causing some discordance within our lives, and we go to get divination and so forth, or we do divination ourselves on a rudimentary level by going to the ancestral shrine and going to the shrine of the abosom that governs us, then we get into that ritual space. We want to provoke the energy of the abosom so we can feel that energy, and so we can, align ourselves with it, so we can become receptive, so we can know what's going on. That same process is taking place. There may be some discordance, maybe some quote-unquote sadness and so forth, and Asaase and Nebuchadnezzar are there to help propel us beyond that. And then we get to Merit Shema, Merit Met. They help to, with those offerings that we give to the shrines and so forth, they help to bring that energy forward, to stimulate us, bring us through chant, ritual chant and so forth, to provoke the energy of the abosom, so that we can provoke a response, just like a child provoking the mother's breast, pulling on the mother's breast so they can receive the flow of milk that will nourish them. We provoke the energy of the abosom through ritual chant and so forth, and it provokes or presses or pushes them to release a dispensation of energy that can bring balance to our lives, so we can go from that worried, quote-unquote, state, or that negative state, or that state of lack, or that state of negativity, to a state of positivity, that lamentation state, what's going wrong, to that merriment state of resolving the issue and moving towards renewal. All of these things are manifestations of the functioning of these female divinities. So, just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. So, okay. So now, if you have any questions or comments in the chat room, you can place those there. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1 so we can see that your hand is raised. This is one of the reasons why HAPI-MERIT, these male and female forces, are the patron and matron abosom or deities of our retreat, the HAPI-MERIT retreat. This is why the retreat is named after them. It's a Hiber-Nation retreat. We become the Hiber-Nation. We're the purified nation of Jiraman, but we become the Hiber-Nation. We go to hibernate, into hibernation for a short period, collect ourselves, nourish ourselves, and so forth, empower ourselves so we can come forward in the spring and manifest what we need to manifest, sprout what we need to sprout, and so forth. So we go into that hibernation period beginning on February 16th in the astronomical zodiac. The proper dates, that's the beginning of quote-unquote Aquarius, the water bearer, but that's really Hapi, the water bearer, with the 2 vessels filling up the river and so forth, and that's also Merit on the female side, the water bearer and so forth, filling up the river, the inundation of the river and so forth. So that's the beginning of that cycle, and of course our HAPI-MERIT retreat this year is from February 16th through the 19th, that weekend in February, beginning of that cycle. So these deities are governing that cycle, so we go into that hibernation space, and we're dealing with Afurakani manhood, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood, Oberima, and Oba time. We'll have the workshops for Afurakani manhood based on our book, Afurakani manhood, Oberima. I'll be conducting that workshop with the brothers who are in attendance. The Oba time, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood workshop based on the book, Oba time, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood, will be conducted by Dr. EGUA. She'll be going over that with the sisters. Those are separate sessions, but then we'll come together for the Asaase session, as well as another session as well. So we're going to be doing that on that Saturday and that Sunday, that Meminida and Awusida, Kwesida. So that retreat, you see the information, HAPI-MERIT, Hiber-Nation Training, Cultural and Ritual Retreat. If you would like to register for that, as we said earlier, because we had a couple of cancellations, a couple of spaces opened up. So we are literally 1 month away, 4 weeks away from the retreat. It's on the Gullah Island, one of the Gullah Islands, Edisto Island. So basically the breakdown is people will arrive on Friday, at some point during the day on Friday or evening on Friday. We'll have the sessions in the morning and early afternoon on Saturday, Meminida, as well as Sunday, Akwesida, Awusida. And then in the late afternoon and evening, people can simply vacation, go check out the Gullah Island. Of course, the Gullah Islands are one of the sanctuaries of our ancestresses and ancestors who were forced into this hemisphere, but some of our people established independent, sovereign settlements on the Gullah Islands, waged war against the whites in Alice Spring and so forth. So these are sacred areas for pilgrimage for our people, for ancestral religion in North America. So this is why we're having the space here. And we even recently found out some details that we didn't have before about the raid that Nana Abena Aramita, Harriet Tubman, led in June during the Civil War between June 1st and June 2nd, the night of June 1st into the morning of June 2nd and so forth. She led a raid of the Union Army into the area where the Combahee River is. It's called the Combahee River Raid in the region of Edisto Island and so forth. Led that raid and helped free over 700 Afuraitkaitnit people from enslavement. She was the first female to lead an armed regiment of the army to free our people, and freeing over 700 of our people. And that happened in that area. We didn't know that it was in that area at the time that we were directed by the Abosom to have the retreat in that area. We found out later, so of course it naturally lines up. So people can vacation and check out the island and so forth, but we have the sessions in the morning and early afternoon on those 2 days, and then people can do what they want to do after that and so forth. So it's, on one hand, it's vacation, but it's also Hiber-Nation. It's training. We're building Afurakani men, Afuraitkaitnit women, rooted in our ancestral religious values. When people leave the retreat, they'll be empowered to conduct those Oberima Afurakani manhood workshops, Obatai Afuraitkaitnit womanhood workshops, wherever they are in their locales and so forth, or just with the people they come in contact with, or share that information with the young people as well as older people that they come in contact with to empower Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. So that's what that's coming up in 4 weeks. We also have our Etchi Sign Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference coming up at the end of March. And hold on, give me 1 second. Hold on. Okay, so we're having Etchi Sign Ancestral Religious Reversion. That is coming up the weekend of March 24th and 25th here in Washington, D.C. This is our 3rd annual conference dealing with Etchi Sign, which means reversion. We're talking about Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African Ancestral Religious Reversion. We don't deal in conversion. We deal with reversion, reverting back to our original pristine state, returning to our ancestrally inherited traditions that we maintained in our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere over the past 300 years, those traditions that empowered and guided us on the best means by which to wage war against the whites and their offspring and force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere through taking up metal armaments, also using root work, conjure, and so forth to wage chemical and biological warfare against the whites and their offspring. We established the precedent for that in the Western Hemisphere and so forth. So we're dealing with the Hoodoo tradition, which is Akan, the Juju tradition, which is Yoruba, the Wanga tradition, which is Ovambo, the Voodoo tradition, which is Ebe and Fon, and so forth, the Ngangan tradition, which is Fang, various different traditions. We have different presenters speaking on different traditions. You look at the website and you'll see that we will be updating it on a regular basis. You'll see all the detailed information there, and we'll continuously post updates. The other piece that we have that we're working on that some of you know about is our film, our documentary film, AMARUKAFO, ADEBISA, ADWUMADI, African American Ancestral Divination Project. And of course, that is showcasing the forms of divination that we maintain in our blood circles here in the Western Hemisphere over the past 300 years, those systems of oracular divination that we still use today that are just as effective as any form of divination found on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit today. We have our forms of divination here that we've maintained that empowered us, as we said, through our ancestral religious practices to wage war against the whites and our offspring and free ourselves from enslavement, organized insurrections, the Hoodoo Wars, the Gullah Wars, and so forth, which forced the Civil War to come into existence and forced the end of enslavement. It was those who maintained their ancestral religious values who are the reason why we are able to walk around freely today. We need to pick up where they left off so we can finish that process and achieve social, economic, political freedom as well, establishing our own independent, sovereign nation, self-ruling and self-governing, and securing that sovereignty. So that the film is dealing with those forms of divination that we still have in our blood circles, that every black person, every one of you, someone in your blood circle has maintained a form of oracular divination that is unique to your ancestrally inherited ethnic group that still exists here. Every one of us is born into an ancestral group. You came through an ancestral blood circle. Your ancestresses and ancestors ushered you into the world through one of your descendants, and you exist in the world. You were an ancestor and ancestress before you came into the womb of your mother. You were part of an ancestral clan. You still have that ancestral energy that you bring into the world and so forth. You're part of that clan and that ancestral divination practice that you brought into the world, that you incarnated with. That's the divination practice that's part of your family. Everybody has that. So we're dealing with that. We're showcasing that. This is part of ancestral religious reversion, reverting back to that original pristine practice that we carried with us when we were forced away from the continent hundreds of years ago. The manner in which we were practicing ancestral religion at that point was fossilized in our bones and blood and time-stamped, and therefore it is that pristine tradition we passed on intergenerationally and transcarnationally here in the Western Hemisphere. This is what the film is about. We want to say, of course, Asaase, thank you to those who recently donated to the project. We went from 48% of our goal to 51% of our goal over the course of a few days. So, and that was just with about 9 or so people. So we have the capacity to reach 100% of our goal. We would like to reach that ASAP as soon as possible so that we can complete the film before the spring equinox, before March 20th. So once we reach our goal, we can complete the filming process within about 30 days. So if you haven't had a chance to contribute to our effort, we've had about 105 people who have contributed to our effort over the past 1 year, 12 months. We started the campaign in mid-January last year. So it's been, this past week, it's been exactly 1 year since we started our crowdfunding campaign. So we've gotten to 51%, but we can get, with about 105 people, we can get to the other 40, 51%, but we can get to the other 49% very quickly. We have 349 people who follow us on our Blog Talk Radio channel as followers who click the follow button, and you receive those emails and so forth whenever we send out an email talking about a broadcast. We have now over 4,400 subscribers on YouTube who follow our YouTube channel. They saw the videos and decided to hit subscribe because they liked the information that they were, seeing and learning about. As we said in another broadcast, we've had over 55,000 downloads of the free ebook versions of our 29 books over the past 12 months. About 4,000 books per month are downloaded on a regular basis. So, and we make our books free, the ebook versions. So we definitely have enough people to reach our goal. It doesn't take everyone. It takes just a small, committed 105 people so far over the course of 1 year, got us to 51%. We don't need thousands and thousands and thousands of people. All we need is a couple of hundred people, and we can get to our goal. So this is EGUA. This is Marketplace Day. We talk about starving the beast and feeding the pride, assessing what funds you would have spent with the white canal spring in the course of a week, and then taking those funds and reallocating them to the business of the week. If you do that with our business, of course, that will allow us to reach that goal. If you were going to spend $10 at Starbucks or Chipotle or Walmart or 7-Eleven for a product or something that you really did not need on that particular day, it may be a Pepsi, it could be a Danish, it could be something like that. One sacrifice in the course of 1 day can make the difference between funding 7-Eleven and some employees at 7-Eleven or Walmart or Chipotle or something like that, or empowering the black community with a film that will actually empower youth as well as adults, also employing black people in the context of this institutional effort, and also employing people just like we do with our books. We have the employment option where people sell our books independently. They purchase them wholesale and sell them retail, and they employ themselves with the work that we have produced. The same thing will happen when we release the film. People that will be part of that, entrepreneurship process. They'll not only be able to sell the books to generate income for themselves, but also the film will be a part of that process as well. So anytime you contribute, you're also contributing to an entrepreneurship option. Our Nokwatefo distributor option is what we're talking about. You'll see that on our website. Some people right now are selling our books and generating income for themselves. That has always been one of our goals, to employ and empower our community through self-employment, giving an option for self-employment so people can be independent. Same thing will happen with the film. So if you have not had a chance this year, this past year, or just period, to ever support the work that we've done, a $5, $10 donation will lead to us reaching our goal. Many of the people gave a $5 or $10 donation, some 20, some 100, but it just varies depending on the person. But any amount assists us in our goal. Taking a few minutes to go to the fundraiser page now will assist us in reaching that within 30 days. You'll see people who have been following. You saw we were talking about 48% a number of days ago, and now we're at 51%. That was a big shift over the course of a number of days. So we can do that. If we can do that with 9 people, if we have 90 people listening to the broadcast, then that could get us to our 49%, the remaining 49% in the same night. So start the beat, speed the pride. And again, Yedase, we thank everyone for tuning in to the broadcast. And Yebe Shabio, we will meet again. It's up.